For more on the digital services tax itself, let's bring in CTV's Colton Praill in Ottawa this afternoon. Hi, Colton. So for those who may not be up to speed, could you explain what exactly is this tax and what is it trying to accomplish?
Yeah, Renee, so this is a tax that is put on international companies and Canadian companies who are primarily doing business in the online world. And it's only focused on the absolute biggest companies. So in order to even qualify for this, you have to be a company that's making at least $1.2 billion Canadian. The threshold is 750 million euros. And of that total revenue, at least 20 million of it has to come from Canadian sales, primarily on digital services. So whether that is online advertisements to Canadians, whether it's selling user data, whether it's running marketplace services or social media services, whatever it is that you're doing, as long as you're making at least 750 million euros a year and 20 million of that is from Canada, then you're going to be facing an additional 3% levy on those digital revenues specifically. And really what this is meant to do is it's meant to acknowledge the fact that primarily in our world, we are seeing commerce shifting to an online experience, and the companies that are behind that commerce are making profits around the world from people, but not necessarily being taxed and giving money back to the countries where they are doing their business. So in the case of Amazon, Google, Meta, for example, they're all headquartered in the United States, making plenty of money off Canadians, but in the Canadian government's minds, not necessarily paying their fair share back to Canada for the profits that they're earning.
Now, it's long been known that this tax was coming. Is there any indication as to why this is suddenly seeming to upset the president?
Yeah, the biggest headline is the fact that the first payment is coming on Monday. This is a retroactive tax, as you acknowledged in your intro. So not only is it implemented in 2024, but it's going to date back to 2022. And so while this tax is expected to bring in about $1 billion a year or so, this first payment, again, that's due on Monday, is expected to bring in about $2.4 billion to the Canadian government. And from the U.S., that's expected to be about 2.3 of that. The vast, vast majority of this money is coming from American tech companies. And so that's a big part of what's driving the frustrations we've seen from the U.S. president. But we shouldn't think that these frustrations are new or even that they're just pertaining to the Donald Trump administration. We know that they go back years. They also cross partisan aisles as well. Joe Biden took significant issue with this tax policy. He filed a dispute under the Canada-U.S. Mexico Free Trade Agreement. We've seen previous bipartisan support from congressmen, from senators, from companies in the United States trying to get this sort of tax either extended, delayed, or fully scrapped as well. So the big push for why this is happening now is that that payment is coming up on Monday. But this has been something that for years across both sides of the border and certainly across both sides of the political aisle, there's been immense pushback on. And for the government of Canada, while it can be a very significant revenue generator, we're talking about over $7 billion in a 5-year span, it can also be a very significant hampering to trade discussions, as we saw with what's going on right now, Donald Trump threatening to pull out of the trade discussions as a result of this tax. This is also something, I should point out, that the U.S. had really hoped Canada was going to drop in those trade discussions as part of a potential leverage tool. It could still come up in these trade discussions should they restart, but certainly there's going to be much more focus on this tax as well in those discussions when they come back.
Right. All right. Thanks for this, Colton. That is CTV's Colton Praill reporting for us in Ottawa.